I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I'm Jeff Pillar. I'm a partner at Duane's firm, Beeson, and Bodine. And today we're going to start with a slideshow that my partner Bob Bonsall prepared, and unfortunately Bob's ill today and couldn't be here. I think he's with us on video. And what we're going to do here is then proceed with our speakers, who are going to start with Kim and Todd Beeson, and our speakers after that. And then we will follow with the reception, which we hope all of you will stay for. I think the general rule is that we're hoping everybody will keep their masks on when they're not speaking out of observation of the usual stuff at this time. And on that note, we'll start with the video. So it's been almost a year exactly since Duane died, and we've been trying to do this unsuccessfully. Scheduled a couple of times before now. And we're very pleased at this point that we're able to do this. And have tried to work with the family to make sure that everybody could be here who needs to be here. And on that note, I'm going to ask Kim and Todd to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'm Kim, this is Todd. And we just are so grateful for you, for the law firm in putting this together. And so the family is full of gratitude for this moment. It's a great value to us. I look forward to hearing your stories. We're excited to hear what you have to say. I think you knew a different person than we knew in many ways. And I think we knew a different person than you did. So it'll be really fun for us. Yeah.
Absolutely, Kim. I just on behalf of Kim and I want to thank the firm, Beeson, and Taylor for putting this all together and all the hard work they've done. We're very grateful.
So I'm going to start. And I'm just going to share a little bit about the dad I knew. And I'm going to read it because that's how I'm going to roll today. So the dad I knew was a man probably like you knew of many habits. Once he made a decision about something, that was it. He was going to stick with it. He was a man of great principles. He thought through how his actions impacted others and how he would approach life. But those habits worked in my favor. For example, every Sunday morning, he would make what he called French pancakes, the crepes, with powdered sugar and lemon. And that was a great tradition that we had. We also ate dinner on Sunday nights. And once he made up his mind that he needed to start jogging, he was a runner in his youth. And he brought that back in his, I guess, early 50s or late 40s. And he ran every single Sunday, often on Saturday, but he would run around the Belvedere Island. He did things I didn't approve of, like he salted his cantaloupe. He worked out in the yard. If anybody's seen the Belvedere house, it is a very high maintenance yard. And so he just labored away. And I think that was part of his therapy. He took us skiing every single winter as a family and backpacking every single summer. So you think of him as a person, and so do we, as very driven and very dedicated to his work. But he had very clear, distinct times when family came first. And in the early years, the skiing and the backpacking was often with Joe Groden and his family over here, Sharon and Lisa and Jan. And those were special times. And as we got older, he rented a cabin over at Echo Lake. And we continued all the way up. I think we had his 90th birthday at Echo Lake.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. We barbecued a salmon.
Yes, and we barbecued a salmon. So, he was a very modest man, but I don't know how many times you noticed those pictures. He didn't have a shirt on. He was out there. He was athletic. He was adventuresome. He was swimming. He enjoyed his fun. And he made sure that he had time for that. And he also enjoyed Thanksgiving. He was a traditionalist. And so he loved Thanksgiving and he loved Christmas. And I could probably spend 20 minutes describing all of the traditions and rituals that occurred during those times. And they were plentiful. The only one I'll mention is the argument that happened every year about tinsel, yes or no. He was no, as well as how to put on the tinsel if he had to.
She's not kidding either.
This is every year. He made an agreement with our mom to always do the dinner dishes if she cooked, and she cooked. That's what she did. She was a great cook. And so he took on the dishes. That probably wouldn't happen. He wouldn't get home till late. So the dishes probably didn't happen until like 9:30 at night or something. And that was also in my favor because I could trap him. I had a trapped audience. I would come down and sit on the little stool by the sink and ask him a question. And I wish I could remember anything he ever said. But he would go on and he'd give me these great, wonderful lectures and sermons about important topics that I'm sure got into my psyche somewhere. But I just simply wanted to be in his presence for a while. And that was my way of doing it. And I enjoyed his humor. I don't know how many of you will catch on to, he had a very dry sense of humor that didn't, right, Esther, didn't go over with everybody sometimes, but it was a fantastic sense of humor. He was a vivacious reader. We always found him reading when he wasn't working. And he held himself, of course, to a really high standard and a very clear set of principles. And he modeled that. He modeled that at all times. He wasn't, even though I told you about the talking, he really wasn't an instructive father. He was a father who you lived by example. He modeled, and then you learned. And he held us to those standards as well. But simultaneously, he also had this unconditional love. He saw who we were, and he didn't try to make us anything other than who we are. And that always felt that I never had the luxury of being upset with him for trying to conform me into something I wasn't. He always loved me for who I was. Anybody who knew my mom, you of course, you'll call him a very steady personality. But anybody who knew our mom knows that he was very attracted to very colorful, spontaneous, unpredictable spirit. Thank you very much for the nods. Very energetic. And she provided all of that generously to him. And they were both devoted to their ambitions in life. And he didn't dote on us kids other than those really lovely traditions. But he played the day. He modeled the way brilliantly. And when I asked Dad as an older man about his thoughts about afterlife, he was raised as a Christian Scientist. And then later he became a Unitarian. And in fact, he taught Sunday school. I think he taught you Sunday school back when they were in Virginia. But the only thing he said when I asked him was that he wasn't certain. He didn't know anything. The only thing he knew was that he belonged to Connie. He belonged to his mom. And so whenever you're in the Belvedere or the Sausalito area and you look out over that Richardson Bridge, or bay, excuse me, over the bay, understand that Todd and I took kayaks out into the middle of that bay. We commingled their ashes and we rested there and their spirit there. Thank you. Yes.
That's hard to follow that. But I was there for most of what you're talking about.
Yes, you were.
And Duane was just one fantastic man. I'm going to tell a story or two. I felt like when we had our family service, I sort of spilled my guts out a little bit. I don't want to do that this time. I just want to tell a story that I feel sort of reveals what my dad was to me and what I realized about him. I'm going to use some notes because like him, I can't, I'm not an orator like my dad was. But when I was 12 or so, my father and I went up to Fort Bragg up on the North Coast. And my grandparents, our grandparents on my mother's side had a house in Fort Bragg. They also had a farmstead in Albion, which is outside of Fort Bragg. And we were up there, and I really don't know if you were up there or not, Kim.
I was up there a few times.
You weren't up there every time. So sometimes I went up just with Dad, or sometimes Connie didn't go. Sometimes all four of us went, whatever, 5 of us. Well, Dad, he liked to get a lot of exercise when he was on a vacation. So he always wanted to walk or run or do something, but it was a terrible day. It was blustery and drizzling and foggy. It was that typical North Coast weather. So we went out to the beach and we were walking along the cliff's edge. And we were getting beaten up by the elements. And I remember Dad was wearing this sort of somewhat flimsy nylon parka and that they used to have back in those days, and unzipped it and tried to shelter me with it. And I said, "Nah, Dad, come on, I'm okay." And we were getting soaked because the swell of the ocean, we were right directly above the ocean, about 100 or more feet. And the swell was just huge. And the waves were crashing against the rocks and pulling all the wind-driven spray and getting us wet. Well, I stepped away when he tried to cover me with this thing and this jacket, and I looked over the edge, and it was terrifying. It was a chaotic maelstrom of giant waves crashing on jagged rocks. And I looked down there, and what came out of my mouth was, "Dad, what would you do if I fell in?" And I was immediately ashamed and regretted that I had said that. It was somewhat disrespectful to say something like that, I felt. But without any hesitation whatsoever, he said, "Why? I would come in after you." And at that moment, it was a very defining moment for me. When he said that, he grasped me with his look. He looked deep into my eyes. And he had this calm strength. And it just struck me that I was looking at the beauty and the tragedy of life in that moment. I was about 12, but I got it. And it was just a very defining moment in my life. And it made me realize, it characterized who my father was for me for the rest of his life. That calm strength, that absolute devotion that he held. And I think that he carried that same inner strength and that same devotion to everything he did in life. So that's my Cliff story. I'm going to say one more, a little bit lighter, and I'll be done. I wasn't going to say this, but since I mentioned that we barbecued a salmon that I caught probably on his 90th birthday. Well, been bugging my dad to go out on the boat with me and go fishing. And he's always, yeah, we could do that, but not today. I'm busy. I got this going. I got phone calls. I got this, it would be like a Saturday. I go, "Come on, Dad, let's go out fishing." So finally, he relented and he graciously obliged. He drove out to Blenus. We went out on the boat. It was a beautiful, calm day. It was a perfect day. And I stopped the boat and we drifted about 2 or 3 miles off Stinson Beach, because I live in Blenus. So we went out through the Blenus Channel, through the crashing waves. But outside, it was nice and calm. And we were drifting and I was busy rigging the fishing rods. So I snapped a bait onto his fishing rod, but I still needed to put on a weight onto the sinker release. But I handed him the pole. He took the pole and went over to the side of the boat and put the bait down in the water and started letting it down. I said, "Well, Dad, wait, we're not ready yet. We're going to troll and we need a sinker." And he said, "Whatever."
He could be dismissive.
I said, "All right, well, Dad, we're in the wrong spot. There's no salmon here. We have to go offshore and like come a couple more miles. That's where they're biting out there." "Whatever." Okay, so I'm getting my pole ready, rigging the bait. And I hear him like making a bunch of noise, and very calmly he said, "I think I got one." And I always had my back turned to him, and I was like, "Yeah, right." And I turn around and the pole's bent over double, and he's got a fish on. So he reeled it in, and we landed a 16-pound
Boy.
king salmon.
Wow.
And my dad was quiet and he looked at it and he realized what a magnificent creature this giant salmon was with rainbow colors. And he looked at me and he said, "So that's all there was to it?" So there we go. That's it.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Justice Joe Groden, who, as you've heard, was Duane's great partner in a number of long hikes that exhausted everybody else that went on those hikes or was subjected to those hikes. And his law partner at Nyhart, Groden and Beeson.
Well, good afternoon, people. And Kim and Todd, thank you for the remarks. Can you hear me all back there? Okay. It's been a bit more than 60 years ago that Duane Beeson entered my life. I was then in a law firm called Tobriner and Lazarus. Matthew Tobriner, the head of the firm, had recently been appointed by Governor Brown, that's the first Governor Brown, Pat Brown, to the California Court of Appeal. And those of us who remained were looking for a senior attorney to fill the vacancy created by Tobriner's departure. We heard of this brilliant lawyer working in Washington, D.C. with the National Labor Relations Board who might be interested. And we invited him out for an interview. You could say it was love at first sight. We offered him a position in the firm. He accepted, and that was one of the best decisions we ever made. On both personal and professional levels, Duane was a treasure. On a personal level, Duane's family and ours shared some wonderful times, backpacking, skiing, and on one occasion, a pack trip in the Sierra I will never forget. Our partner, Stanley Nyhart, proposed that we rent horses and a guide and spend a couple of nights at a lake near Pinecrest that he knew from hunting trips he had taken with a Teamster business agent for one of the cannery locals. This turned out to be a family expedition. Duane and his wife Conley, Stanley and his wife Debbie, my wife Janet, who is here, along with myself and such of our offspring who were old enough to ride a horse. I learned with amazement, because I had forgotten, that our daughter Sharon was only 4 years old at the time. The statute of limitations for child abuse has since run, but I don't know how we agreed that Sharon could go along. Anyway, Stanley told the packing outfit that he knew how to get to the lake. And he also told them that we had experience in packing horses. Both representations proved to be wild exaggerations. We got lost getting to the lake. The horse carrying most of our food and supplies was overloaded and lopsided. We were on a narrow trail traversing a steep canyon when this poor horse slipped and fell down the side of the canyon, fortunately coming to a stop partway down, but so entangled in the bridle and ropes used to tie our belongings that he couldn't stand up. There was a good deal of noise coming from the horse, as well as what appeared to be blood rushing from the horse's side. While the rest of us stood there looking on, Duane pulled his sheath knife from his sheath and in a heroic gesture, leaped down the side of the canyon, cut the bridle and ropes, enabling the horse to get to its feet. What appeared to be blood turned out to be spaghetti sauce that Stanley had packed in a jar, a glass jar. But the horse was saved, as well as for the rest of the food for the trip, and we finally made it to the lake, though after dark and totally exhausted. And Duane had established as a reputation as a person who could be relied upon to do whatever was needed, necessary, whatever the emergency. On a professional level, Duane proved to be an exceptional lawyer, dedicated to his union, the workers they represented. He carried over into his professional life the same kind of Boy Scout attitude that he had demonstrated on the horse trip, sometimes to extremes. The interview that he and I had that is reprinted in a pamphlet that is available around here, recounts a story which he confirmed. And that is that he was negotiating on behalf of what was then the local 302 milk wagon drivers, since defunct. I don't think there are any more milk wagons. And there was an issue on the table, which was keeping the parties from reaching agreement. Language was proposed, which you all will understand was deliberately ambiguous, leaving for people like John Cagle or his father to figure out if there was a dispute later on. But Duane and his Boy Scout character and upbringing with the National Labor Relations Board said, well, this looks okay, but I just want to make sure that we all understand the same thing by this language. Well, of course they didn't. That was the point. And the negotiations broke down. Duane later came to appreciate the values of creative ambiguity. I suspect many of you have heard the parable of the three bricklayers. A traveler came upon the three men working. He asked the first man what he was doing, and he said he was laying bricks. He asked the second man the same question, and he said he was putting up a wall. When he got to the third man and asked him what he was doing, he said he was building a cathedral. Duane was not just practicing law and representing clients. Although he would deny it, he was building a cathedral. The arguments that he made on behalf of his staff or of his clients were aimed not just at winning the case, but also at establishing precedents brick by brick that would help advance the cause of unions and their members for years to come. He was, in a practical sense, an architect of the law, a lawyer with purpose and integrity. Over the years, Duane was a mentor and inspiration to many young lawyers, some of whom are in this room. And for me personally, knowing him and being his friend was a gift I will always treasure. What did I do with my stick? Okay.
Our next speaker is Peter Nussbaum. So Peter was a longtime colleague of Duane's. He was a partner in the firm that was two firms that came out of Nyhard, Groden and Beeson, Nyhard Anderson, and I see that John Anderson's here today. I'm very glad to see John. And what became Beeson, Taylor and Bodine. So Peter, if you could come on up.
Joe Groden is my neighbor and a hard act to follow. Jeff said something which isn't true. I actually did not practice law with Duane for very long. It was a very strange situation that I won't get into all the details about. But I met Duane in 1974 when I was hired by the firm that was then Brundage, Nyhart, Beeson, and Taylor. Joe Groden had just left the firm, and Joe had actually told me there was a vacancy in the firm, his, and I met Joe somehow, and I was looking for a job, so he sent me to the firm where I interviewed. And I got the job. I never met Duane before I was hired because of this internal thing that was going on within the firm, but I'd been there only a few days, and Duane, whom I knew who he was, he walked in to the tiny little office I had, which had a painting by Matt Tabrina on the wall. And he said, I have something, can you help me with it? And I said, sure, what is it? And he said, I'm tied up today, but I got a phone call from the NLRB about a case we have, and they want me to call back, but I can't do it. Would you do it? Sure. And at that point, I hadn't practiced labor law at all. I'd taken a labor law course in college. I'd taken one in law school. The college one was actually better. But I didn't, because it was taught by somebody who was a practitioner as opposed to just someone who studied labor law. So I said, sure. So I called up the NLRB, and I don't remember the name of the agent, it was a woman. And I explained to her why I was calling. I said, so Duane would like to find out why you had called him. I can't recount the conversation to you because the entire conversation was nothing but sections of the NLRB in cases I'd never heard of. I had no idea at all what this person was talking about. And I was writing down as quickly as I could in shorthand case names and stuff like that. Later in the day, or even the next day, Duane came and said, were you able to do this? And I said, yes. And he said, what did she want? And I started reading from my notes, and it must have been obvious to Duane that I didn't know what I was talking about. But maybe the case names made some sense to him. They didn't make any sense to me. But the reason I'm telling the story is because of something that Duane taught me at that time. He, to some extent, was rightfully, or could rightfully have been kind of annoyed about the fact that I didn't know what I was talking about, and it really hadn't advanced things that I had spoken to this person. But that wasn't what he didn't come across that way. He thanked me for what I had done, said he appreciated it, but couldn't talk to me anymore because he had to go back into the negotiations. And I remember thinking at that moment how nicely he treated me. And it's something that I always remembered as I went through my practice as an associate and a partner and a senior partner, of how higher up people should treat people they're working with. In a way, you know, not to make them feel bad, not to make them feel like fools. It was a very important lesson to me that I tried to follow. The next day, Duane came back and sat down with me when he had more time and explained what the case was about and what all those names were about. I didn't get the opportunity to practice with Duane for a long time because the firm, when I got there, unbeknownst to me, was already split into the Nyhart side and the Beeson side, and it was about to formally break up. And I was with the Nyhart side, even though the people I was closest with at the firm, Ken Silbert, Don Taylor, they were in the other firm. But Duane didn't leave my life because I left the firm. I made a point whenever I would see him of trying to talk with him. Very often it was at the Yosemite conference where we all went, and he'd always, ask me what I was doing. We would talk, and I really enjoyed those conversations with him. But he had more of an influence on my career because when there were conflicts that his firm had where they couldn't be involved in cases, very frequently he referred the cases to me, which I took as a great compliment. Although why he did it based on that first episode, I could only think that he was referring them to me because he thought I was such a bad lawyer, he didn't have to worry about losing the client to me. But in later years, he called me up one time and said he had a case he wanted me to get involved with. And some of you may know it's a case called Granite Rock. It was a stupid case. It was an employer who apparently was a jerk I never got to meet, who decided he was going to try to bring a tort action under Section 301. And Duane's firm couldn't be involved because it was both the international and the local that were involved as defendants. So he asked me to represent the international. He cleared it with the international. So we took the case. We filed a motion to dismiss in the district court. It was dismissed. We went up to the Ninth Circuit. We argued the case. We won the case in the Ninth Circuit. And then much to our amazement, the employer filed a cert petition. Even more to our amazement, the cert petition was granted. And at that point, with the case up in the Supreme Court, my assumption was that the International Union would get somebody to get involved in the case who had Supreme Court experience. I had none whatsoever. I'd read Supreme Court cases, but that was the extent of it. And Duane called me up and said that he would like me to become involved in the case, that he had spoken to the international and had cleared it. So I said, sure, I'd be happy to do it. And we assumed that we would file an upsert and we would get rid of the case. And much to our amazement, the Supreme Court granted certiorari. So at that point, with the case now in front of the Supreme Court, I thought, I'm probably going to be out of the case. It's going to have to be argued. I've never argued a Supreme Court case. And Duane came to me again and said he had spoken to the international and had told the international that it was his strong recommendation that I continue to do it and that I'd be allowed to argue the case. And the case was argued. I got a chance to argue it. Ken Silver and Barbara Schiavone, who were very close friends of ours, went back to hear the argument. And of course, it was just a wonderful experience to be able to do that. And it was only because of Duane and his confidence in me, not based on that first experience. Anyway, so unlike a lot of you, I didn't have an opportunity, which I regret, to have practiced in person with Duane over the years. But our lives intersected several times in various ways, and in ways that were very beneficial to me and in ways that I enjoyed. And I'm glad I had those opportunities. Thank you.
So our next speaker, Pat Szymanski, is the man who really broke Duane's heart, and something he never really recovered from when he left the firm to go to Washington in 1984. Pat Szymanski.
So Duane, we're all here. And we know that you would be tremendously embarrassed that we are all here. I serve on the board of the Peggy Browning Fund, and at one point we decided we were going to start having an event here in San Francisco, and they wanted to know who are we going to honor, and I said there's only one person we're going to honor in San Francisco, and that's Duane. And so they said, well, will you ask him whether he will do this? And I had talked first to Jeff, and I knew that the firm had been trying to arrange a dinner party, something like that, to say happy retirement to Duane. And that Duane was having none of it. So I was forewarned when I called Duane and I told him what we wanted to do. And he said, no, Pat, I'm really not, that's not something that I would be comfortable with, whatever. And I said, well, wait a minute, Duane, let me explain this to you. I can be smart alecky every once in a while, and sometimes Duane would get hard on me about it. There was one time when I had a case, and when I was leaving, as Jeff said, we appeared before the judge in the case, and I said I was absolutely sure that Mr. Beeson could handle the case. And afterwards, Duane was angry. He was one of the only times when he was upset at me. But I told Duane, I said, look, Duane, you're going to be the honoree. Yes, absolutely. But you have to understand, the reason we're using you is to raise money for the Peggy Browning Fund. And he said, oh, now that I understand, it's okay. He said that would be fine. As we get older, the list of the departed who have been important in our lives gets longer. That's just the way it is. That's what happens. For me, Duane comes right after my mother and father. There is so much to celebrate about Duane's life and what he accomplished in the pamphlets and otherwise. And I know we're here partly to celebrate, but there are memories that we all have about this. I especially love the in memoriam that's on the firm's website. Whoever all got together and did that and put it together, it's marvelous. It couldn't be more perfect in terms of what it is. And the one part I particularly like that some people have alluded to here is that, quote, through various splits and regroupings, the firm came to be known as Beeson, Taylor, and Bodine. Now, for all of us who are young lawyers in the firm, those are code words for the begats, which Duane or Don Taylor or Harry Polland or somebody would explain to us at some retreat that we had early on in our life in the firm. Duane was wonderful. He was wonderful to young lawyers as he was to me. And I think I speak for all of the young lawyers who are either here and had Duane as a mentor, or those people who may be joining us by video conference. He was kind. He was understanding. When we made mistakes, he often covered for us with the clients. He could call them and say, now look, I know Pat should have done this, that, or the other thing, and he didn't. But he's a young lawyer. He needs a little time to catch up with everything, and he will. So don't keep him. Don't tell him he's not going to represent you anymore, which could happen, could have happened. As Kim said, he taught by example, mostly by example. There were times when there were other sorts of things that went on, but one story that I told when we had the family service almost a year, not quite a year ago, was that I remember Duane taking me and teaching me how to ski. He enticed me to get on the chairlift and go to the top of Alpine, which I understand has a different name now. And he got up there and we got off and he said, follow me down. Now, you know, yes, right. That's exactly what happened to Kim, and that's what Kim said. And I will tell you that mountains look pretty tall, but when you're at the top looking down, it is a scary experience. Bert Boltuck and I visited Duane one afternoon at the Belvedere House, BTP, before the pandemic. It was a glorious sunny afternoon, and we spent probably 3 hours with Duane, talking about recollections and memories and what he was doing and so on and so forth. And he was in tremendous spirits, the way Duane always was. He was always looking forward. He would tell me, don't look back, look forward. When we were leaving, he said he expected to live another 20 years. Duane was a comrade, a compadre, a fellow traveler. I just found somebody that spoke to me to the way I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And I think we saw things, or maybe because he taught me or by example or otherwise, in the same way. You know, when we lose someone, we think about the things that we should have said before that person passed. There are always a list of things like that. And the more we ponder those sorts of things, the more we realize that very likely the individual who passed knew exactly what it was that we didn't say. They without saying it or being told or anything like that, they knew what it was. And so, but I will say some of the things that are on my list. We loved you, Duane. We absolutely loved you. There's just no other way of saying it. You were an important part of our lives. And we miss you. We miss you. And I'm going to do something that may be a little bit dangerous, but so what? So I think that there were some things that Duane would have said to me and to all of you that you should understand. Duane would have said that he loved life, and he absolutely did, and that he loved Connie, and it was always obvious, and that he loved and was proud of Craig and Todd and Kim and the grandkids. He didn't talk about them very often, but when he did, you could tell how he felt. He appreciated and he loved all of the lawyers that he worked with, the young lawyers, the partners, even his opponents. He just thought it was wonderful that he was able to do what he did. And he loved the union officers and representatives that he worked with. Absolutely. He wasn't perfect. You weren't perfect. You sometimes didn't live up to exactly what it was that Duane thought you should do. But you should know that Duane absolutely thought he was honored to be working with you and doing the kind of work that he did. And that's the way I feel, and I think that's the way all of the lawyers in the law firm felt who worked with Duane. We were proud to be union lawyers, absolutely proud and thankful and honored. So I would say one thing that has come to me over time is that in these kinds of situations, tears are okay. That they're just fine. There's nothing wrong with them. And I would say to Duane in closing that you were a very important part of all of our lives, that you are still with us in what you taught us and the example that you gave, and we miss you. Thank you.
So like Pat, our next speaker, Neil Bodine, came to the firm in the 70s, and he established the Sacramento office along with Carol Livingston. Neil, can you come out?
Pat, to some extent, stole my thunder. Talking about Duane as a mentor, but that's what I'd like to focus on today. Because his presence in my life and many other lives was transformative. I would not be the person I am today, but for Duane Beeson. Duane had a very high standard for his work and our work. In fact, there's a story, it's probably apocryphal, that one of his smart-ass associates had a brief to do, and he stole the whole portion of Duane's brief and inserted it, changing names and facts, and gave it to Duane, and Duane rewrote it. Anyway, he had a very high standard of practice. He had a very high standard for us. He expected a great deal. He wanted high quality. What was different was that he believed in our ability to do it. He just expected. He knew we could do it. He convinced us we could do it. I'm going to tell you 3 brief stories that illustrated my life. I did not come to law out of the labor movement. Came out of the anti-poverty program, was going to become a legal service lawyer. I came to work in the last semester of law school for Duane and Dawn as a clerk. And at the end of the semester, Duane said, "What are you doing for the summer?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to take the bar." He said, "Great, that's not a full-time job." "So you take the bar in the morning and work for me in the afternoon," which is exactly what I did. And I believed him. I fell absolutely in love with the work. I fell absolutely in love with Duane and the law. This is what I wanted. And I passed the bar. And then he asked me, what are you going to do now? I said, "I'm going to wait for the bar results." He said, "Why don't you come work clerk for me?" And I never left. 6 months later, I passed the bar. 6 months after that, he comes into my office. I'm a brand new lawyer. And he says to me, "We have a problem." It turns out that 2 years before, the firm picked up Joint Counsel 38, which Bob LePron had stolen back in the 50s, and they managed to get it back. They hired a young lawyer named Steve Naiman. He was handling it, and Steve took off and went to work for Bob LePron in LA. So Duane walks in and says, "I'd like you to take over Joint Counsel 38. Now, I'm 6 months as a lawyer at this point, no experience with the labor movement. I said, "I can't do that." He says, "Oh, you've been around the block a couple of times. You can do this." And so I took over Joint Counsel 38, 20 lawsuits, 14 arbitrations. I don't know how many board cases I had. Every Saturday morning, we sat in his office and we went through each one of those cases and what had we done that week, and he helped me do it. And I was able to do it because he believed in me and he convinced me, "You can do this," which was the way Duane was. He He raised us to his level by not just believing in our capability, but believing in our heart and our commitment. And then 4 years later, I had opened the Sacramento office. It was a real struggle. I was trying to do it alone, and I had known Jerry Brown in a seminary, so I got this call from his office saying, "We would like to appoint you to PERB." And I was, young lawyer, flattered, wonderful opportunity. Duane came and met with me and with Joanne, my wife. And he said, "If you do this, you will regret it for the rest of your life." And all deference to Joe, he said, some people are meant to be judges and some people are meant to be law professors. Some people are meant to be advocates. You are an advocate. The labor movement is in your heart. Working people is in your heart. That's where you are. That's where your happiness is. That's what you love the law. You love working people. That's what will make you happy. And he was absolutely right. And I made the right choice because Duane believed in me and knew it was in my heart. And on that level, we were simpatico. We were heart space together. And what I learned as a mentor is that you need to hold the people who come to work for you for the highest standard possible. But you also need to believe in their capacity to do it. You need to teach them they can do it. You need to teach them how to do it. And you need to teach them the love of the law and the love of working people. Because what we were doing was not just practicing law. What we were trying to do is transform society. And I worry for the labor movement, I worry for our world, but Duane is the one that taught me this is what we are trying to create. And still influencing all of us, influencing the firm and everybody in the labor movement. This is what we are trying to create. I love you, Duane.
So of all Duane's long-term clients, the one that he was most identified with, rightly so, was Teamsters Joint Council 7. And the president of Joint Council 7 he worked with the most closely, Chuck Mack, is here today to make a few remarks.
Jeff, thank you. And it's a real honor to just be asked to speak. And I speak on behalf of so many of our representatives that are here today and have joined in the celebration of Duane's life. Duane was one of the most unique and exceptional individuals that I had ever met, got to know, and became associated with and worked with over my career in the Teamsters Union. He was just so unique and so different than most of the people that we came into contact with. I'm not talking about members, it was different there too, but also with professionals. In my mind, what made Duane stand out and so different than so many others was his character. He had just such strong character and the traits of his character. He was sincere. I mean, when he said something, he meant what he said. He was factual. He was truthful. Never, ever was he dishonest or in any way devious or hypocritical. At the same time, he had tremendous integrity, personal integrity. He was a man of principle and would not compromise on the ethical standards that he established for himself in his life. He too, and we've heard that today, had such great wisdom, obviously, when it came to the law. I mean, he was just exceptional, but the same thing was true in his life and what he did in his life. He, with us in the Teamsters, he never intended this, but he became a mentor for so many of us in the union movement. We watched how he worked, his way he did things, how he would handle problems, how would he work out to resolve them. And he basically established a model for all of us to follow. Not that we did, mind you, but it was there if we chose to do it. He was also extremely courteous. I mean, he was so courteous, and that required, in my opinion at least, a tremendous amount of patience on his part. I mean, the idea of showing some courtesy to the adversaries on the other side, who were very difficult to work with, was amazing. But he treated people the way he wanted to be treated, even if they were bad guys. He was charitable, and his charity was essentially given to the union movement. Duane could have made a lot more money if he'd have gone to work on the other side and represented employers, and everybody knew that, and he knew it as well. But he was a person of principle. He believed very strongly in the trade union movement. He believed very strongly in representing members within the organizations that the firm represented. And he stood by that and stayed with it, and was just absolutely exceptional in what he did and how he did it. He was a person that did have extreme values. He stuck by those values. And what he wanted to happen, he wanted to have a trade union movement and members within the organizations be represented appropriately and represented strongly, to have a strong voice representing the organization and the member. And he wanted to be that voice, and he was that voice, and a very, very effective one. With all of that, he was probably the most humble person I'd ever met. I mean, he just was very, very humble. He had a case and he won the case, or an arbitration and won the arbitration. It wasn't because of him or for him, it was for others. And at the same time, he felt no need really to celebrate or rejoice with any type of victory. He was looking to the next challenge and moving forward beyond that. The one experience that I would talk about is kind of interesting, because I was thinking about this and experiences I'd had with Duane over the years in the union movement. And I remember this one case that he had at Local 70, but I couldn't remember the name of the case. And today, as I was reading the booklet, I got into it a little bit. Here was the case that we had talked about so many years ago, and that was the Granny Goose case. Years ago, we had a dispute, we being Local 70, with Granny Goose. And we had picketed them and taken them on many different accounts. They filed an action against us in court. We had Duane come in to represent us. Duane did represent us. It went to court and we lost the case. And at that point, I pulled back a little bit, looked around, and then finally evaluated this. And Local 70 at the time, we had more problems than we had money. And so if we lose the case, I met with Duane basically to say, what are our next steps, if any? And without hesitating or equivocated in any way, he looked at me and he said, well,
And I explained to him that we still were short of cash in these cases and didn't have a long way to go for them. And we understood that. And he said, well, here's what will happen. We go to the next level, we're going to lose. That's what, Jesus. But if we go to the Supreme Court, we're going to win. And I was stunned by that. I mean, I never thought about this case going to the Supreme Court or any action before the Supreme Court. And he said, but he was so sure about what the outcome would be. And knowing him, I was absolutely impressed. And we gave him the go-ahead, take this case on and let's see what happens. Duane was right. We lost at the next level, but when the case went to the Supreme Court, we won. And I was astounded. I mean, I thought, wow, this is really something. We've won this case. But it shows what kind of a person he was, how sharp he was, obviously, with the law, how careful he was with members and his constituents, and just really was an exceptional individual that we appreciated and also loved very, very much. He was missed immensely by those of us in the labor movement. He was the person who you could go to and you could get a straight answer. Sometimes you didn't like the answer, but you got the straight answer. And he'd tell you the truth, what he thought the outcome would be, and also make suggestions on what you do. But missed, we can be thankful for all that he's done over the years for workers in this country and for unions. It has been absolutely amazing. And we can all be thankful for the time that we had with them, sharing the experiences in that time just made better people out of all of us. Thank you.
So the guy who has the job that Chuck used to have was the president of Teamsters Joint Council 7. Jason Rabinowitz also has the perspective of having been, before he assumed that august title, partner in the law firm. Jason.
Everybody. So it's a great honor to have the opportunity to help recognize and honor Duane Beeson today. And as Jeff says, I come to this from a couple different angles, because the last 10 years I've been a Teamster official, and so the firm that Duane led as now my lawyers, and I'm their client, and as a result, that they're really nice to me now. It's nice. But before that, for 16 years, I was an attorney at the firm. For 10 years in the Oakland office, and for 10 years at the Sacramento office, and then 6 years in the Oakland office. And when I started at the firm in 1996, they told me, well, Duane is winding down. He's going to retire very soon. They said, and he's cut back his hours, so he's only working about 40 or 50 hours a week, and instead of 80 or 90, and which, by the way, wasn't exactly accurate. He was still working as much or more than any of us. And by the way, they said, well, don't worry about it. Duane works a lot of hours, but they don't expect you to keep up with that pace. But they said, no, he'll be retiring in a year or two. 16 years later, when I left the firm to go to work for the Teamsters Union, Duane was still there, still working for the firm. And the fact that he stayed that long, besides being a boon to the labor movement, was also a boon to me personally, because especially once I moved over to the Oakland office, I had the opportunity to work closely with Duane on several cases, and to get to know him, which was one of the great gifts in my life. Duane was a great mentor to me and so many others. He was a role model, but he was one of these role models that you can never hope to like be like do all the things he does and to be like Duane, but you could watch him, and as others have said, learn so much, not just about how to be a lawyer or how to serve the labor movement, but how to be in this world. And so although we couldn't hope to be just like Duane, we could aspire to learn from him and to emulate his many wonderful characteristics. It was an interesting thing going around with Duane in those last few years because he would often get introduced as a legend. People say, "Well, this is Duane Beeson. He's a legend of the labor movement," and he would, which he was, and he would accept that with a lot of grace and humility, which was his style. And you say, "Well, yeah, I've been around a long time. That's what happens. That's what happens." I don't know if this is gonna resonate with anybody, but I would, when I looked at Duane, I would think of, most of us, we do our best. We get mixed reviews, we win some, we lose some, and, some people like us, some people they don't. But, in this world, there are some folks that, rare individuals that are kind of universally acclaimed and admired, this is the part that might sound silly. Like I think about like Michael Jordan, right? Or Derek Jeter, because my deep dark secret is I grew up in the Bronx and I'm a Yankee fan. Don't tell my members there's an election this year. Or the Beatles, that like there's these few individuals that are just universally acclaimed and admired in their field, in their realm. And that's how I looked at Duane. Everyone loved Duane, everyone admired Duane. I just say, well, how does that happen? Because I felt this great fondness and admiration for him, and too. So I'm thinking about this for today. I was thinking, you need to understand not just Duane, the legend of labor law, but Duane, the human being, which I got to see too. People talked about how he was a gentleman. He treated everyone with kindness and respect. He didn't raise his voice and pound the table and grandstand like a lot of us lawyers would do. And that was true. And at the same time, he was unwaveringly partisan to the union and to the working class, dedicated his entire energy to this great cause. He always put the interests of the labor movement and the firm ahead of his own. And someone mentioned, we can go into labor law to become super rich. But even within the firm, I would see the sacrifices that he made to ensure the firm's success and to ensure that the firm would continue, because he understood, I think, the importance that the firm had to the labor movement and the importance that the labor movement has to our country. Duane loved the union. He loved the law and the work that he did more than anyone I've ever seen in my life. I have this vision of Duane, like if you'd go in his office with some kind of like arcane, thorny labor law question, his face would light up and he would smile and he'd be like he just won a trip to Disneyland, right? That he would have the opportunity to grapple with some legal issue, because he loved the intellectual challenge, but he also loved the task of helping our clients and helping working people. I think that's part of why he worked so long in the job. That's my theory about it, that, he just loved it. And what a blessing that was for him and for those of us that had the honor to work with him. Duane was a kind and generous man. And others have said he was not the type of person that wanted to grab all the credit. He would share the credit when there was a win. And when we accomplished something, he was generous and kind to new associates. He advanced the role of women and people of color in the legal profession at a time when the labor bar was not necessarily known for its diversity. At the same time, he wasn't shy about his critiques. And someone, Neil mentioned that apocryphal story of somebody submitting him his own work and how he kind of tore it up. And no one knows if that's really true. So, but it could be. But I can tell you my own story when I was, because he was notorious for unsparing critique of others' writing. And Duane was known for being a great writer. He was also an economical writer. And he would make his point very concisely and no wasted words. I'm not known for my economy of words, as you're probably going to find out during this presentation. So one of the first times I interacted with Duane when I was still in the Oakland office, I got assigned to a case that he was leading, and I wrote the brief. And he called me up and he said, you didn't really have to go on that long. It's a pretty simple point you're making. He says, you really were really kind of beat the dead horse, Now, some people might have stopped there, but he went on. He said, and after you beat the dead horse, you jumped on top of him and you strangled the horse and you pulled his tail and you kicked the horse. And it kind of went on from there. And I don't know if he was demonstrating to me in practice what beating a dead horse looks like, but at any rate, that always stuck with me because it was a service. He was being honest with me, and he was helping me to learn, and with a little bit of humor, making his point. Others have said Duane was a humble man. Rarely do you find someone of such great achievement show such humility, but he exuded a quiet confidence that I think many of us could only aspire to. He could be proud. I worked with Duane towards the end of his career, and I think towards the end there, he was pushing 90. We were working on this case that had us traveling around, and the only time that Duane ever got mad at me or expressed any kind of anger to me was when we got on a plane and he had his bag, and I tried to take his bag and help him put it up in the overhead. He grabbed that bag back from me. I could do that. And that's just how he was. And I've heard he said he'd live another 20 years. And, I always thought he would work forever. I think certainly his mind was still able at the time that he retired, and which was soon after that I moved from the firm. Duane loved his family. I want to express my love and gratitude to the Beeson family for sharing him with us. But he would talk about Connie and talk about the kids, and we all love the story about how they built that house from the railway bridge, and had the privilege to go up there a couple of times when we had some partners meetings up there. And also he let some of the younger associates house sit when you go on vacation sometimes. So Duane, cover your ears. They would have a party, So I got invited to some of those. And so I got to, oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, what better place, right? So, I feel honored to feel like family with Duane, and that, our Teamsters Union is a family, and just glad that we're able to share these remembrances together today. One thing that I wanted to say, though, that one of the things that I think why Duane was so admired is that he was such a well-rounded person. People have talked about the different aspects of his life, but I was really surprised the time when, because you think of Duane as kind of like the straight-laced lawyer, but I understand Connie, was a free spirit, and I remember just what stuck with me was seeing, I think I'm not imagining this, that there was a picture of Duane and Connie with Carlos Santana partying down. And I remember going into the house and seeing that picture of me and yeah, this guy's pretty cool. So anyways, Duane the man and Duane the legend of labor law was a great gift to all of us. I'm honored and grateful to have known him and to have worked with him. I'm sad about his passing. I'm grateful that we had him in our lives and in service of our union. So today, much love and condolences to Duane's family, to his Teamster family as well. And Duane, may you rest in peace. Thank you.
And appropriately to bring us to an end, the last speaker who's going to be on video to us from Central Illinois, where she's now located, is a person, Sheila Sexton, who is much missed in the firm and was, of all of us, perhaps the person who, especially at the end, was closest to Duane. So if we're technically up to this, Sheila, you're on.
Hi, everybody. I think I was asked to speak because I was fortunate to spend my entire legal career working at Beeson, Bodine, and under Duane. Unlike Duane, I didn't have a Harvard pedigree, and I don't think anyone would have or has ever referred to me as a lawyer's lawyer. I entered the fancy financial district office of that time a bit disheveled, some would say probably quite disheveled, and carrying many years as an activist as my background. I didn't go to law school till I was 30. And Duane took me as I came, and he carried me forward. And like others have said, I would not be the person I am if I hadn't have worked with Duane. He was the best mentor. He taught me to write. Jason addressed some of this. Some said that he favored women, so that may explain Jason's experience versus mine. I remember the first thing that I wrote for him, I had a writing assignment, a letter that was like a page and a half, and I gave it to him, and he brought it back, and he said, Sheila, you did a great job, and he handed it to me, and literally one sentence was circled and the rest was crossed out. but he emphasized that that one sentence that he didn't cross out, he really thought I did a great job. So that carried me forward, because I didn't have that inner confidence as somebody who came from any lawyers or anything. So I needed that, and Duane provided that for me. He also taught me, and given the audience, you may have already heard this, but it's interesting that he taught me how to write letters for clients, really embodying who that client is. And especially somebody like Duane, who had been doing it for so many years, that came second nature. I was, of course, learning to write, but then also he encouraged me to embody the client that I was writing for. And the stories are legion about the letters that he wrote, for example, for Bob Morales, where he would become Bob Morales as he wrote this letter. And it was not Duane speaking. He knew what needed to be in the letter, but he also needed to convey that this was Bob speaking, or Marty Freitas, or somebody else with a slightly unique personality. He always enjoyed presenting those personalities in his writing. To this day, I still have to write. I'm a staff rep now. I'm like a business agent, like I used to counsel people for AFSCME. And I do have to write letters where I have to subtly thread some needles. And I'm always thinking, how would Duane write this? And it's always helpful when I reflect on that question. Others have said Duane was curious and creative. He did have this rich desire for the continuing intellectual interest in labor law. And of course, some of it, he created, the older stuff and the newer stuff, but more so, he just was a creative, curious person. And that's a trait that I hoped to carry forward, and I still hope to do it. I don't remember him saying this is good enough for anything. He always wanted to do it the best. He wanted to address and tackle the analytical problem that was before him for the client in the best way possible, and working and reworking his drafts until he nailed the argument. Not that he had to rework very much. I always had this theory where, Duane worked on a typewriter. Most people know that. And a lot of his drafts were single drafts. There wasn't a lot of redrafting. And I always speculated that it was because of the extra pressure that it took to hit his keys, as opposed to on the computer, it's so easy to write and rewrite and free write. I think Moritz Duane's brain was, it came out in legal briefs, his thinking. His interest in that, in the intellectualization of labor law and law never declined. He was not the senior attorney who assigned legal research to associates unless it was not interesting at all. If it was an interesting question, as Jason said, he wanted it. When he retired, and we've all referred to different times that he retired, but when he actually did leave the office with his typewriter, I asked him what he was going to do, and he said he was going to study how the money system was created. Again, he was always interested in rich intellectual pursuits. He was a lawyer's lawyer and an intellectual's intellectual, yet he was also humble. And this has been mentioned also. Any member who walked in who wanted to talk to Duane, he put down the Supreme Court brief, he put down whatever he wanted, and he sat for 15, 20 minutes or more talking to that member about the case that Duane had won for the member or the case that Duane had lost. But the member said, yeah, but you fought like hell, Duane, and you know, you're great. They didn't see you coming. He was about the members, he was about the unions. He also was resilient. And this is the other, like, as I was reflecting on what exactly Duane gave me, resilience was a quality that I had to some degree, but I didn't have to another degree. I would finish a difficult brief, or I would get a loss in a case, and I would be basically done for the day, you know, or use it as an excuse, I'm going to the bar or something, you know, and then I would see Duane lose a big case and immediately put a clean piece of paper in the typewriter and start the next brief. And I talked to him about how he could do that. And he said, the only way to survive in this practice is you dust off your back and you move forward, and you can't just wallow. And he was resilient. There was one time he and I were working on a weekend in the Oakland office, and there was a shot, and then there were screams, and I was down the hall, but he had the view of the corner where something had happened, and Duane was typing away, and he was hard of hearing at the end. So I thought, oh, he didn't hear it. But we looked, and there was a woman who had been shot in the street and laying in the street. And we watched the ambulance came pretty quickly. And at that point, you know, there really was nothing that we could do. But again, Duane just kept typing on his brief. And to be clear, it wasn't a lack of heart. It was resilience. And it was just knowing what he had to do and moving forward with it, and a strong work ethic. It wasn't due to a lack of heart. Duane was very fortunate to have the main side of his life populated with Connie and Todd and Kim and Craig. And Todd and Kim, I'm so sorry that I can't be there to hug you in person. I'm sorry that you lost Craig. And in addition to your parents, Duane would talk to me about each of you with love and respect, sometimes surprised, because he did have that unconditional love for you. And he would say, you know, it's interesting, you know, I don't know how these people develop, but I just love them so much and respect what they're doing. And he never expected you to be anything other than what you were, which is what you had said, Kim. And so I'm just reflecting that back, that is what he said. And you each have helped me make the decision to move closer to my parents so that I could support them. So I want to thank you for your insights, advice, and example, and for effectively sharing your dad with me. So thank you. And thanks to Duane.
So thank you, Sheila. Thank you all for coming, and please join us for the reception.